Welcome, students, to your first lesson in forensic science. That is appropriately named Introduction to Forensic Science. So as we go through this video, feel free to pause it. Feel free to rewind it as many times as you need to get all the information on each slide. I might go a little fast, so it is perfectly fine for you to pause it. Just make sure you have everything down. All right, so with that, let's get started. So what is forensic science? We've been in this class for a week and we have yet to talk about it. So what is this class that you're in? What science are we learning? How are we going to apply this? Well, what this class is all about is the application of scientific knowledge and methodology to legal problems and criminal investigations. In the most basic definition I can think of, it is the application of science to law. In forensic science, there is a bunch of different uh, career paths that you can go down with different skill sets that all help law enforcement officials conduct their investigations, which we will find out in a little bit. But again, the most basic definition I can think of is the application of science to law. That's what this class is all about. So what kind of science goes into being a forensic scientist? Well, it turns out a lot of them. The first one being chemistry. Chemistry is used heavily in forensics, whether it's with toxicology, which is about drugs in the body, or whether it's about chromatography, or just so many different things you can use chemistry with. Next one being biology. You have to have a working knowledge of how the body works and how all the environment works. You need a strong background in both of these for sure. Obviously, firearms. We talk about ballistics, which we will talk about later in this class. How bullets go out of guns, what bullet belongs to which gun, how it was fired, residue left after. Very important. Document examination, talking about forgeries, talking about different handwriting techniques, whether a letter was formed or forged or not. Photography, it's very important in crime scenes, which you will find out later. Toxicology and drug analysis, which I've briefly already talked about. If you don't know what that is, that's going to be a fun topic that we will talk about later. And technology. In a forensic lab, there's so much different technology that you will have to be able to use and be able to work with, as well as examining other pieces of technology that could be involved in a crime. And last but not least, fingerprints, which is probably the thing that you are most familiar with what a forensic scientist does. But it is a big part of the job as well, especially when it comes to like murder weapons. So what is it like to be a forensic scientist? Well, basic job description includes processing and documenting crime scenes, collecting and preserving evidence, analyzing and comparing evidence in the laboratory, reconstruction of data, and forming the best theory of events in the case, testify as an expert witness, scientific research, and training others in forensic science. So, there are many different types of forensics, because again, forensic science is just an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of different skill sets. So, a lot of these different types of forensics you've probably seen on some crime TV shows or movies, or just stuff that you've probably been aware of. You just didn't know that that was a part of forensic science. So, the first one that we see is computer forensics, which is highly emphasized nowadays. As you can see, its computers are used for fraud and pursuit of other crimes has increased to dramatic proportions. With everything being on computers nowadays, it's very emphasized. Specialists deal with computer crimes such as fraud, but not just that. They deal with things like pornography, child sex abuse, and the sale of black market goods online. Moving on, we see that there's three more types: forensic accounting, forensic archaeology, and forensic dentistry. Didn't know dentists could do forensics? Well, now you do. So forensic accounting is they seek to trace any financial discrepancies within a company's accounts and use so-called paper trails or audit trails. So if a company has been dealing shadily with some money, they can track it down. Forensic archaeology, archaeology and anthropology are the study of historic human remains and the objects, buildings, and other artifacts associated with them. So this would be like dealing with bones and stuff if they were left at a crime scene. Forensic dentistry, this is actually how they caught Ted Bundy, and they were able to convict him. You should look that up. Very interesting. It's the area of forensic medicine concerned with the examination of teeth especially in the cases of victims who cannot be identified. In this case, they identified the one who was murdering people. Moving on, we see two more, forensic entomology and forensic graphology. So entomology is the study of insects, and people who specialize in this can use insects to provide more information about crimes, whether it's seeing different bug bites or examining the bugs around the area. So, and forensic graphology is the study of handwriting, especially that found in ransom notes, poison pen letters, or blackmail demands. This is used a lot if they suspect that say a suicide note is forged and they suspect foul play. And you see, I know everyone has seen this in a TV show or movie where someone will cut out letters from magazines and make that the ransom note just so forensic scientists cannot study their handwriting. So this is a very cool part of forensic science that we will talk about later. Moving on once again, we see we have forensic medicine and forensic pathology. These things can be very well connected. So forensic medicine, if a body is found in a field with no visible signs of injury, forensic medicine seeks to answer the questions. How did the body get there, and how did the person die? Well, that connects with forensic pathology because pathology is all about discovering the cause of the death, especially in cases where it is sudden or the police suspect foul play, such as murder. So this deals a lot with autopsies and stuff like that. So the last two careers that we will talk about are forensic psychology and forensic toxicology. Forensic psychology is the forensic study of the mind and the ways in which the mind works, especially in the instances of violent crime. So if any of y'all have ever watched Criminal Minds, forensic psychology. And forensic toxicology. Every one of you has probably been exposed to this at one point. If you've ever been drug tested or ever know someone who has been drug tested, that is forensic toxicology. It deals with the investigation of toxic substances, environmental chemicals, or poisonous products. What they will do is after they get a sample, they can run the sample through a bunch of different tests and see what kind of substances are in that sample. So it's a mix of other disciplines such as chemistry, pathology, and biochemistry, and even shares ties with some of the environmental sciences. So it's a very big field in and of itself. So after looking at all the different careers, if any of those seem any kind of interesting to you, and you are wondering, how do I become a forensic scientist? Well, here's how you get started. So first, you do need a BS in science. What they prefer it is to be in biology, chemistry, or even forensic science if the school that you go to offers it. So the first thing, you have to go to college and major in one of these three things and get a degree in them. Some schools do specialize in a forensic science BS degree. An example of that is John Jay College of Criminal Justice. There's a website right here. If any of you are interested in that, I can send it to you. If not, don't worry about it. But if you are interested, it's a pretty fun field to go into. So maybe look it up. And say you do go to college and you want to be a forensic scientist. Well, what skills do you need? You need to know how to have good observation skills using all 5 senses, especially at a crime scene. You need analytical skills, ability to identify a problem, organize info, and draw conclusions. Because unlike what we did in class, being a real forensic scientist, you don't get all the clues handed to you. You have to find them yourself. You have to be able to walk into a scene and be able to know what you're going to do. And deductive reasoning, using logical steps to draw a conclusion based on facts and evidence. And you have to do that all by yourself with no one helping you. So it is difficult, but it is worth it. So a really good question to ask is, are forensic scientists part of the police department? Well, that's a tricky question because the answer is it kind of depends on where you live. In some places, in some counties, in some states, they are independent, and in some of them, they are part of the police department. There's a website here that shows you all of the accredited forensic departments that are in New York, and you can see that they're all over the place, whether they're independent or whether they are part of the police department. But the one thing they have in common is that they are all accredited, because the one thing that is very important for each lab is that they must be accredited to hold up in court. And if they are not accredited, then all the evidence they find will get thrown out. So if you want to go right here, if you want to put this into your computer, you can see there's an article about a forensic lab that was shut down because it was putting out the wrong information. It lost its accreditation, and therefore everything they've done is thrown out, and the evidence just doesn't matter anymore. So, moving on from there, we are going to talk about the federal crime labs. The federal crime labs are obviously not independent. They are part of the bureau organization that owns them. The four major ones are the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. All right, they own the largest crime lab in the entire world. All right, next one is the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. If you've ever watched Narcos, you know what the DEA does. And they analyze the drugs that they seize from illegal operations. The ATF, if you've ever seen Waco, another show on Netflix. It's a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They deal mostly with alcoholic beverages, weapons, and explosives. And last but not least, the USPIS. Yes, the Postal Service owns their own forensic crime lab, and they deal with crimes involving the Postal Service. Seems like overkill to me, but what do I know? So this brings us to our last section, crime lab history. We will talk more about this on Wednesday. We'll have our own slideshow just dedicated to it, but I'll introduce a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. So R.A. Rice was the first forensic photography lab in 1909 in Switzerland. So as you can see, that forensic science is a pretty young profession. Edmond Locard was the first crime lab in France and in the world. In 1910, he created or discovered the Locard exchange principle. We will talk a lot about that later. Just a quick introduction of what that is. In the U.S., crime labs began as police agencies. August Vollmer was the first crime lab in the U.S. in 1928 in the Los Angeles Police Department, and Calvin Goddard was the first to use forensic science in the U.S. following the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago by examining bullet and cartridge case evidence in 1929. A little bit more, the FBI, again, that owns the largest crime lab in the world, didn't even start until 1932. It's not even 100 years old yet. The New York City Police Department began 2 years later in 1934, and in 1994, Congress passed the DNA Identification Act, which basically opened up an index of a lot of fingerprints that they found, either fingerprints from suspects that they have, fingerprints from crime scenes, or fingerprints from unidentified remains of people. And what it does is that it has this giant index, so anytime they find fingerprint somewhere, they can run it through this index to see if their person is in the system, which helps a lot in analyzing crime scenes. So then we have CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Index System, a database funded by the FBI, a national database of DNA profiles from convicted offenders, unsolved crime scene evidence, and missing persons. So again, that's kind of what the DNA Identification Act does. So I know that I went fast today, and I apologize for that. But again, you can pause this video and rewind it as many times as you want. Just make sure you get all the information. If you have a question about anything, or you'd like to know more about a subject, please let me know and I will look into it. And I would love to be able to answer all your questions. So just make sure you get all the information done in this video.